Bart.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this Price Your Art with Confidence webinar. Confidence, yeah. Did I say that? Strategies for artists in today's market. We'll let everyone join in. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, maybe where you are logging in from. I'm also going to give everyone a moment to grab a pen, maybe some water. We have a lot of content that we're going to cover today. So take a moment, log in, introduce yourself, and then we'll get started in just a moment. I also have a poll that I'm actually going to launch that is just helping us kind of get to know who's in the audience. It helps us kind of gear the information. We have a ton of experience on this panel that I am so excited that we all get to talk and that you'll hear from all of them and their expertise and experience. And it'll kind of help us guide, understand where you're coming from, how long you've been working as an artist, kind of medium. So feel free to fill that poll out. And then I don't know, Jodie, Shelley, Kate, can you see the results of the poll on your end yet?
No, I can't see the results.
Okay, I can share them when they're done then. Hello. Hi from London. I'm currently in London as well. Hi, San Diego. Hello, Susan from Pittsburgh. Oh, this is so amazing. It's so fun to see when you have a Zoom conference where everyone is joining from. That's what's amazing about technology. And what we really love about these webinars is we can have people join from all over the world and get to experience conversations like these. So thank you all so much for joining. I'm going to move on through as you're filling out the poll to a few housekeeping items. So yes, we are recording. We will share the recording afterwards in a follow-up email. Have no fear. If you need access to captions, you can click the little show captions button that should be on your Zoom menu. And then for introductions and technical support, use the chat. So as you can see, the chat can get really busy and sometimes questions can get lost in the chat. So for our Q&A section at the end of this webinar, send your questions in the Q&A using the Q&A button on the Zoom menu. That is how they will not get lost. We'll go through them. And I have two of my colleagues on here as well from Artwork Archive, Katie and Anna, who will be looking through those questions, answering throughout if they can, and then making sure that you get answers at the end. If you need to contact Artwork Archive at any point, you can contact us via email at team@artworkarchive.com. You can also contact us via chat on artworkarchive.com. So if you don't get your question answered, or if you have any, thoughts, feedback, or also you just want to reach out, you can always do that after the webinar as well. And then if you're brand new to Artwork Archive and you're joining this webinar and you have no idea who we are, I always love to do a really quick little intro just so you kind of have some context. We are a cloud-based art inventory management system. So we've been around since 2010, one of the first cloud-based art inventory platforms out there. And essentially, we're an all-in-one solution for inventory, client management, career growth, super user-friendly. I was actually using Artwork Archive as an artist before I joined the team. We are global, so we have artists in over 130 countries. And we really try and emphasize organization, helping you protect your artist legacy and helping you grow your career. So if you have no idea and you want to get started, we have a 2-week free trial. Check us out. You don't have to enter a credit card or anything like that, but we're going to be sharing for a lot of you who are Artwork Archive users. I know that we have a ton who are joining us today. We have a lot of slides that will give you specific tips on how you can utilize Artwork Archive when pricing your work and how it can really inform and help you grow and with price increases, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a lot of information for you. So thank you so much for joining. And then I'm going to pass the mic to our panelists actually so they can introduce themselves. My name's Cassidy. I'm with Artwork Archive. And then I want you to meet and hear from them. So Jodie, if you don't mind kicking us off.
You bet. Well, first of all, thanks for joining us. Holy crap. I'm looking at all of the places you're coming from. It's unbelievable. Scotland and Paris and Ohio and Brooklyn. It's amazing. So I'm Jodie King. I'm a seven-figure artist, but I've been painting for 21 years. I've been a professional artist for a long time, and I priced my art really poorly in the beginning. So I feel like I've made a million mistakes and have learned from them. So hopefully myself and the other amazing panelists here uh, can share from experience. But now I've got a podcast called the Honest Art Podcast, which is in the top 5% of podcasts worldwide. And I am a mentor and a coach, and I help artists who are, ready to go hard and make this like their full-time gig. So I'm really honored to be here, and I'm grateful that you're here as well.
Thank you, Jodie. We're so glad you're here. Shelley, I guess I'll just pass the mic so we don't have to.
Yeah. I'm Shelley Bierman. I am based in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been on the business side of the art industry my entire career, so about 15, 16 years now. Starting out with a art business master's degree from Sotheby's Institute of Art. And from there, I've worked in several different roles in the art business sector, including fine art insurance broker, gallery manager, studio manager, and now I am a artist manager, a fine art appraiser, and an art consultant. And as an artist manager, I help contemporary artists run their business. And so I work as one of their sort of team members, as one of their advocates, and I do everything to run the business from day-to-day operational tasks like invoicing, client communication, managing pricing structures, of course, which is what we'll talk about today, up to high-level strategy, long-term goal setting, and marketing plans. And I'm excited to be here today with these wonderful panelists. I'm excited to talk to you all, so I look forward to getting started.
Thanks, Shelley. We're so glad you're here with us. Kate, on to you.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Joyner, and I have been a professional artist for about 8 years now. I went to San Diego State a long time ago and studied art, went back to school and got my degree in 2016. And I paint, I say unapologetically, in acrylic paints. I do primarily landscapes, and I'm pretty much at this point navigating through a mid-career level of art, just through going out there and doing the steps of trying to build an art career. So hopefully I can share my own personal experience with you and help you out with that. And thanks everybody, and thanks to Artwork Archive, which I absolutely love, for inviting me to be here. So welcome everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks, Kate. Gosh, I just got so excited again. We're gonna have so much fun. Kate also is going to walk us through. She has very graciously provided us some very specifics in terms of price increasing or increases, and she's also walked us through how she's used Artwork Archive. So I thought that would be really helpful for those of you who are using the system. Okay, poll. We are done with the poll. I'm going to end it actually and share the results just so everyone can kind of see some of the information. So kind of all over the map, which I love.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
Yeah. A lot of painters. Someone in every single medium, someone working in every single medium, which is amazing. And it looks like we're all selling all over the place as well, which, we're kind of doing it all as artists, right, aren't we? So this is great. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And a few more kind of intro slides. So just to give everyone an overview, this is what we're going to be talking about during this webinar. We have a ton of information. We've got, a little bit of time. We've got enough time, but obviously this is such a huge topic. So we're going to go over why is pricing so difficult, where to begin, what to avoid. We're going to introduce some common pricing formulas and talk through them, when to increase your prices, price increase examples, and then we'll do the Q&A. So send your questions through the Q&A section, and those will get answered towards the end. We're not going to do questions throughout the webinar, just because sometimes that can kind of stunt conversation or take it in a direction that where we can't cover all the information. So we're going to try and keep that to the Q&A section in the end, but still send them all throughout the webinar. Okay, our first question, why is pricing so difficult? There's no one size fits all formula for art. Jodie, I actually wanted to ask you, as a coach where you work with artists so much, what are some of the common pricing mistakes that you see artists make?
Well, I think I'll speak to my pricing mistake, and I see this with other artists as well. But one of the hardest things is that it's really hard to discern the quality of our own art and therefore price it on quality, right? I mean, and we're going to talk later, I think, about a formula. How do you use, I like to use real estate as a kind of an example for comps, but the hardest thing is like, how do you know that your art is good enough? And like, for me, I remember I was selling direct to collector, and it's so funny because everybody loved my art. Everybody, meaning my family, my friends. like I didn't. So I just thought, oh my God, my art is so good, right? And it actually kind of sucked. And so when I went to put it to apply to galleries and things, they were like, yeah, no. Absolutely not. So determining the quality of our art, for me, I see that like I thought my art was better than it was, but other artists think it's like worse than it is, and so they're like delighted when they're like, "Oh my gosh, really?" So determining the quality of the art, I think, is the hardest thing that I see for the artists that I have the pleasure of working with. I think the quality, it's so hard to know.
That's so true. I also realized I want to ask everyone who's in the audience, why is pricing so difficult for you? So I know that you probably on the registration form can send some questions, which we took into account with all of these slides, but let us know. So why is pricing so difficult? Why do you feel, if maybe it's really easy for you, and thanks for joining us anyways, but if it's super difficult, is it because, yeah, it does not seem dependent on quality, hard to know your worth, stick with it, designer discounts, I want to get it out of my studio, how do you compare to other artists, location? Yeah, Jodie, a lot of people saying, yeah, what is the quality? Knowing your worth, local art market. Okay, so a lot of the feedback that we were hearing as well, and what we've all probably experienced as well, is, artists struggle with linking prices to self-worth, fear of overpricing and underpricing, lack of market knowledge, balancing accessibility with profitability, maintaining consistency across mediums and markets. I wanted to ask Kate and Shelley as well, do you have any examples of when you were first, dealing with prices with artists? Shelley, you were dealing with artist prices. Kate, were there any mistakes that you made in the very beginning that you were like, oh, this is really difficult for me?
I'll speak for myself. I don't feel like I did it wrong. I think I'm doing okay the way I did it, but I really stuck with, a textbook formula of how to do it. And when it was definitely scary, especially when I started to, I first started out and I'm like, maybe I'll get $150 for this painting, or, you know what I mean? It's kind of tricky, but when you realize that you can sell to someone besides your friends and family, and it's not that lower price. And then also the difficulty of deciding I'm going to put 4 figures on this piece, and that's really daunting going to that level. And it's, we were talking about imposter syndrome, and you're like, can I really do this? And after a while, it's just, I didn't start out that high. I built my way up there. So, I mean, I don't know if that answered the question, but from my personal experience, it wasn't too bad. I haven't never had to lower my prices. They need to go up.
Yes. Yeah. I realize also we have, this information where to begin. A lot of people were asking, where should we begin with pricing? I also wanted to ask, actually, Shelley, how have you seen artists overcome pricing being so difficult? Is there a moment that you feel like you've witnessed where there's like an aha, or is it kind of an ongoing process?
Yeah, it's definitely an ongoing process, and I wouldn't say there's any one aha moment. I think one thing that all artists can do to feel consistently confident in their pricing structure is to choose a pricing formula that works for you, and we'll get into more specifics about that in a little bit, and stick to it. But in addition to that, keep some sort of record of your pricing. I mean, I use a simple Excel spreadsheet for all of my clients, and of course I have a database system where all of our, the sold art is located. So don't reinvent the wheel every time you need to come up with pricing. Make sure you have it documented somewhere so that if you price this piece at X amount of dollars, the next one that's comparable is going to be X amount of dollars. And it becomes a lot easier to go through that process when you have it all written down and you have a record of it somewhere.
Amen. Let's walk through some where to begin. So these research comparable artist and artwork. Jodie, this actually might be a good time for you to talk about your comp method, which I love because you compared it to houses, and I feel like it's we'll actually show the different formulas, but maybe that might be a good headspace to get everyone in when we're talking about comparison.
Okay, because, well, just like Shelley was saying, it's so hard to know, and it's so hard to you got to have a formula, because if we cannot base on our emotions. We cannot base our prices based on emotions, because for me, like my latest piece that I created that I'm excited about, I would want to price it higher than something else. So I always suggest to my clients is that let's start with comps like we would for real estate. Okay, so a comp would be, we need to have like a similar style of house with a similar age of when the house was built, and like all of these similarities, right? And so for us, it's like the similar style of house. You can't really compare a house that's super, super contemporary to an old ranch style, whatever. So look at artists and their art that is of similar style than you create. So if I'm creating, abstract art, abstract expressionism, I'm not going to compare my prices to, say, Western realism, right? Those are two completely different things. So we want to compare. First, look at artists and their art in the same medium that you work in, right? Or the same style that you work in. Then in the same way as we wouldn't compare a house that was built, 30 years ago to current, what we want to do is we want to look at artists who are at a similar stage of their career as we are in. So let's say, I just started a year ago, 3 years ago, something like that. And my art is, I feel like it's of this certain quality, but I really can't compare it with somebody who's been in this for 40 years and has been in museums and is, has a CV that is much more expansive than mine. So comparing it to similar style with a similar career stage, right? So those two things are so important when we are going to price our work. And then the next one is going to be the tricky one, is like with similar quality, right? So you have to have similar quality, which can be touchy. And I always suggest to my clients, it's like, get a non-biased review of your quality. Like for me, I had to go in front of a gallery owner for her to go, yeah, nothing special here, right? So that hurts. I wouldn't suggest that. I would say go join artist organizations, join artist communities that do art critiques, things like that. So you can get a non-biased view of the quality of your art. So between those three, you should be able to get really, really close to a price per square inch that you can use in the formula that we're going to talk about in a minute.
That reminds me, do you have any tips for, looking on Instagram? Is it websites? Is it galleries? Like where are some places that you feel like finding comparable artists helps?
So that's a great question, because a lot of times like galleries will gatekeep the pricing of their artists. So it's kind of hard to find the pricing sometimes. I always say, go to that artist's website. You can look at social media. I encourage all artists to put their pricing on social media, because otherwise people will think they can't afford the art. So go to social media, or just go to shows that are in your area, go to those places, and literally not only will looking at the art and then seeing what the pricing is, that will also help you with networking. So any kind of sideways, whatever you can do to find the actual price of the art is going to help you out.
Amazing. The gatekeeping is a real issue, I feel like, in trying to find, yeah, you can find similar artists, but you can't figure out how much they're charging, or you have to reach out to the gallery maybe they're being represented by, and
I get this,
yeah.
I get this question a lot about, should I or shouldn't I post pricing on my website? I get that a lot from artists, and my personal philosophy is that, you know, if it's under a certain price level, let's say that's 2,000 or 5,000, you know, it's okay to post on your website. But if you're selling things for, let's say 20, you know, 10, 20, $30,000, it might be a bit of a sticker shock for people. So maybe at that point, it's more of like a inquire for pricing type situation. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with posting pricing, kind of to a point. And then you also have to, and we'll all hear this topic over and over again, you do have to keep all that pricing consistent with all of your sales channels. So if you do post pricing on your website for pieces that are available in your studio, that has to be the same price as a comparable piece that's being sold through a gallery or another sales channel.
Absolutely. And I just want to share that someone came up to me at an art show this weekend, and they said, oh, you're going to be buying direct from the artist, so you're going to get a better deal. And I quickly corrected her, and I just said, that is not the case. And if a gallery found out that you were actually selling your stuff lower than what they were, you would be out of that gallery in a heartbeat. So
yeah, you'd be in a lot of trouble real fast.
Yeah.
And you don't want to get that reputation in the market either, because if one gallery, you know, galleries talk, everybody talks, it's a small industry when you get down to it. So if you start undercutting your galleries when you're selling out of your studio, you're going to have a really hard time finding a gallery in the future.
And people talk.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have a slide too of what to avoid, and then, you know, the collector kind of mindset of what they're seeing. And if they hear when people are talking, if you've been changing your prices. So,
yep.
With the beginning, just these last few points, I want to make sure that we kind of set the groundwork before we go to formulas of really understanding what goes into pricing. So I feel like a lot of artists also, personally, actually, I guess I can speak for myself, I might be selling my work, but I'm never actually making a profit because I'm actually not understanding the true cost of my expenses, because I'm not properly keeping track of them, or I'm just pricing, not realizing, you know, the materials are actually needing to be, you know, I need to raise my prices. You know, I feel like those are things that a lot of people do not take into account. They might say, okay, you know, I'm just going to do this number, but really their practice, whatever their medium is actually really expensive. They have way more expensive materials, or maybe, you know, they're framing in a certain way. Like, all of this is really important to know, and your market and location. You know, are you in a rural setting more than an urban setting? I mean, all the artists you're trying to compare to, like Jodie was talking about, are they in a really big city where this type of art is just, you know, everything and more? Or, you know, are you kind of in a setting that is a different market? Are you online, in person? Are you needing to factor in gallery commissions? So, you know, are you working with a sales representative at all? And you need to kind of consider that, because you think you're pricing in one way, and then, you know, that commission cut happens and it actually is not profitable or sustainable for you. So our whole goal with this conversation too is to help you have a sustainable art career. And I feel like pricing is a really big part of that, because it might not be that you are not able to sell your work because of the work. You know, sometimes it's pricing, sometimes you're undervaluing it all factors in. So it's worth considering every single aspect of what goes into pricing when you are struggling with it.
And I think to this point of, sorry to interrupt somebody.
No, I was going to ask, anyone have any more points before we move on to the next slide?
Yeah, so just part of this factoring in the gallery commissions, as I said, you do need to keep your pricing consistent between all your sales channels. But let's say you've been selling out of your studio since you began as an artist, and that's all you've known, and then you do get picked up by a gallery. And so now all of a sudden, you know, you're used to making 100% of every sale. Now you're going to be making 50%, but that might be an opportunity in conjunction with your gallery to increase your pricing. You know, when there's a big exhibition or an opportunity like that, that would be a good example of considering a price increase. But then again, it would have to increase even on pieces you're continuing to sell out of your studio if that's part of your arrangement with your gallery. And also to that point, lean on your galleries for advice and ask them what they think is sustainable for their clientele. And, there's also kind of, if you're in a rural town, in, Iowa, and now all of a sudden you're selling at a gallery in New York City, perhaps you've priced out your local collectors, and sometimes that happens. I mean, that's, you also kind of have to weigh those pros and cons at the same time.
That brings me to a question as well.
I just want to say, I don't think that any collector or anyone that's bought your work is going to be disappointed that you raised your prices. So
Exactly.
if you've bought them at that point, I mean, sometimes they're like, oh, I can't afford their work anymore. But maybe they got something when it was and you were local, like you said. But I don't think they're ever really disappointed because they have more value in the piece that they have.
Yeah, exactly.
I just want to say something real quick. I've just been looking at the comments, and some people are worried because we're talking so much about galleries and gallery pricing, and for people who are not in galleries. And so, like, that's a really valid point. But to Shelley and Kate's point as well, it's like where regardless of where you are, it's really the consistency, which is kind of how we got onto the gallery thing. So the consistency and pricing, not on emotion, but based on a formula. And then if you do get in a gallery, just make sure that pricing is consistent throughout your work. So I know people are a little like, wait, I'm not in a gallery. How is this? Just as long as you have your own formula, that's what you can go by. You'll be fine.
And I've only been in a gallery for the last year. So I can speak to that. Like, it's not just about galleries. So we'll get into that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like, artists are showing in so many different venues. There are so many places where you're exhibiting your work where maybe there's, a cut that someone takes, maybe there's not. But just to consider, if you are exhibiting your work in any way, the cost of that exhibition as well. A lot of the time, the cost is on us to frame it, to hang it, to, do most of it, the marketing for it. So just consider all of that. That's all a part of your business. Here are some main things to avoid. So we kind of already spoke on those, emotions. I do find a lot of artists, and I've actually talked with people who have, they really believe in pricing on what they feel emotionally is the value of their work. And while we're not saying anything is right or wrong, and we want to offer all these options, I do want to hear opinions on kind of this, are there some pieces that you feel like, gosh, this is just my favorite piece of all time, and I just want it to be $1 million because maybe I don't want to sell it? Or like, what happens when you run into that? Have any of you experienced that?
I have pieces that are like, you just step back and you go, wow, that, excuse me, that's like my favorite piece ever. And I'll hang it in my home. And then the price for that will, it actually is not for sale, but if somebody wants it, it's for sale, real expensive.
I'm in the same boat. I don't want to hang on to anything.
Mm-hmm.
I have one son, and I do not want to burden him with a ton of work at the, when something ever happened. It's like I love my work, but I'm not, there's some that are really, really special, but the right price, I guess.
You'd also be surprised how often what's a favorite of an artist or of one of my clients is not a favorite, never sells, even if it is for sale. It's amazing how often what we think is our favorite is not a favorite to our collectors, and vice versa. Sometimes the thing that we thought was, not the best ends up selling first. So it's so hard to know.
So true.
That is so true. One of these that I wanted to touch on was relying on discounts. So Shelley, I feel like you see discounts often, and I wanted to ask you, you kind of talked about when we were talking earlier about don't rely on discounts. Why is that so important?
Right. Don't price your work at a level that you expect to give a discount every price, every sale. The price is the price, and you'll hear me say that all the time. This is the price. If there's an extenuating circumstance, it's going to the trade, a designer or a consultant, that's fine. Friends and family discount, fine. But don't price it at a level that you're expecting to give a discount on every single sale, because it causes your collectors to lose confidence in your pricing ability, and it devalues your market. If somebody reaches out to you and before there's even, a conversation, you're offering a 20, 30, 40% discount, your collectors will lose confidence in your professionalism and your ability to price your artwork. So it's okay to use it as a sales tool. Don't expect to use it on every single sale.
Do you find that, this is for all of you as well, when artists are quick to discount or quick to say, like a friend reaches out and you're like, oh, okay, you can have it for this. Like, is that more of a you problem? I'm asking maybe for myself. It feels like maybe that, yeah, what you're talking about, Shelley, it's a confidence of not standing behind your prices, even when someone's not asking for a discount.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're selling it to your aunt or something, I mean, sure, you can offer a friends and family discount, but if it's, your aunt's sister's neighbor, I mean, you have to stand by your price at that point. Not everybody gets a discount.
Yeah, for me, it's like, oh, go ahead, Jodie.
No, I was going to say, I agree completely. Like it tends to be a self-confidence and a self-worth issue, because there are times when we just offer discounts and nobody is asked. They don't even they never intended to get a discount. And we just go, oh, I'll give you a discount. And they're like, okay, but that's like says something about you not really respecting or honoring your own work. And then I have other artists that I've worked with, and they want to go, I need to make some room in my studio, so I'm just gonna put it out there, it's 50% off everything. And I know Kate and Shelley agree with this. You don't want to do that, because basically what you're saying to all collectors and then the universe, nobody else wants this either. Right. No, nobody wants these paintings, so I'll give you 50% off. It's just, I haven't seen it work.
Me neither. Yeah. And the whole rhetoric around, fire sale, moving sale, everything must go sort of thing. It's just, it becomes feeling too much like a commodity, or like something, that just needs to be sort of liquidated. And that's not really how we should be thinking about our art.
Are there instances where you're like, I just need to move this? I just need to move these old pieces. Is that an instance then you can do a discount, or?
I don't think you'll see the results that you're expecting, to be perfectly honest. I don't think that's the answer.
I do have, like, I've done this. I mean, I'm going to share it out there, but I have done where I had certain pieces that I, just don't have stuff for, but I will invite friends and family, like 10 or 15 people, and I'll just say, come over, and I'm like, take whatever you want. It's this price, whatever. And it just kind of clears up for me, and I just kind of move on from those pieces. But it's never publicized. It's not, I don't know if that's a good idea, but it's just maybe super old work. Maybe I'm going to paint over it. I mean, if they don't take it, maybe I will paint over it. But I don't know. I just, like, it's someone that I'm very, very close to, and I know I always wanted something, and it's like, okay, here, get this, but I don't do that. I've done it twice, and I'm like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to do it again or not, but just I don't know, for what it's worth.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, and again, to maybe things aren't moving, maybe there's a reason, and you do just paint over it and start over. I mean, nothing wrong with that either.
Exactly.
And we're all, what I love about, all of these different perspectives too, is there's so much experimentation that happens, where when you're testing out your customers and what do you need, our careers are long, and sometimes you do need to just sell some pieces, and you need to invite some people over, and you need to, move some work. And I think that that's all really valid. So I really appreciate you guys. Oh, I skipped to the end. Really appreciate you guys being honest and sharing what's worked for you and what's happened in the past. Okay, I'm gonna move quick. Sorry for anyone.
This is a good point too. I just saw somebody mention, or donate it to an auction. That's a great way to sort of give back and move some pieces and hopefully get some more exposure in a different market. That's a good point.
So now here are some common pricing formulas. these are 3 examples. Of course, there are others out there. These are what we have found to be most common. If you're looking for a formula, remember this, we always take into account your medium, your career stage, quality, the things that we've already kind of covered. Jodie, I wanted to ask you, how do you recommend artists determine, which strategy or pricing formula will work best for them if they're looking at this and they're like, ooh, which
Well,
one?
first I want to clarify that I mostly work with 2D artists who are painting. I do work with some sculptors and ceramicists, but primarily. So this square inch pricing is great for 2D artists. I will also say though that I work with artists all over the world, and sometimes depending on the where they are, they prefer to do the linear pricing or price per centimeter for linear centimeter. So just a disclaimer, everybody does something a little different. But for what I always recommend, so that I'm not pricing by emotion, is the square inch pricing, which is super easy to do, even for my non-math brain. So you just take the width and the height of the painting. So let's say it's a 30 by 30, right? That's 900 square inches. If it's a 30 by 40, it's 1200 square inches. If 24 by 36, you guys get the idea. I don't actually know what 24 by 36 square inches is. So y'all have to do that math on your own. But anyway, you take add the length and the width and the height, and you multiply that times a dollar amount per square inch. So what is really interesting is that research shows that if you're just selling primarily on social media, there's a sweet spot between 50 cents per square inch, $1.25 per square inch. That's just a sweet spot. It means nothing. My prices are much higher than that, and I still sell a ton off of social media. But if you're just starting out and feel like you're a really new artist, you're not quite sure of your quality, but that's kind of a sweet spot. But but that's just keeps it easy. So let's say you've got a 30 by 30, and I'm only doing this because I can't multiply 24 times 36. But let's say you have a 30 by 30. So that's 900 square inches. And you have determined, based on other artists in your area, same quality of work, same type of work, all of the things we talked about earlier, that you're at about $1 per square inch. That's going to be $900. 30 by 30 is 900 square inches times $1 is $900. So that's how that works. And then I know Kate's going to talk later about how to raise your prices. You guys want to stay for that because it's really, really cool. But I think that's just an easy formula if you're going to do, per square inch pricing.
And I wanted to say also that one of the comments, and this is something we all wanted to discuss, is that people often think that you need to, someone asked, what if something's more detailed than another piece? So if you guys want to at all address that and why you don't change your prices for that.
Yeah. So if somebody here's the thing, some paintings paint themselves. Do you guys ever have that? How did that go so well, so fast? You even second guess yourself. And then other paintings, you have to wrestle to the ground for weeks, months, something like that, right? The collector doesn't care. It still has to be based on the price per square inch, whether it's easy, whether it's detailed, whether it's whatever it is. If it's the same medium, then it should be priced similarly for price per square inch. So in other words, here's what I mean by this. So when somebody says something's more detailed, it's are we now painting in realism? And we were painting in abstract before, very different mediums, right? So it would be different pricing. Kate, is that what you were suggesting, or?
Exactly. But as an artist, it's really daunting because you know how much time you put, and I'm addressing to the audience, oh, I just whipped that painting out. And like you said, the other ones you wrestle with. And it's how can I honestly charge this much because I didn't spend that much time on it? But it's the value of how many years you've been painting, the experience that you are bringing to that piece. It's not that actual piece. It's the hours and the time put in to get to where you are right now that determines your value and what your dollars per square inch is.
Yeah. And somebody said, I price by size, not by square inch. So the thing is, you need to know the size to price by square inch. So it's not two separate things. They go together. They're hand in hand.
And Jodie, also, it's not necessarily the same dollar amount when you're getting smaller and smaller and larger as well,
Right.
because that
Right.
can
There's
kind
sort of a
be
sliding
uneven.
scale there.
Yeah. So the way I do it is I have my sizes that are like the most comfortable for me that I paint the most often in. So for me, different for every artist, but for me, it's like that 30 by 30, 30 by 40, 36 by 36, up to 40 by 40. That's just my sweet spot for me. Other people, it's 12-inch by 12-inch or, or bigger, whatever. So whenever you go significantly lower in size or significantly higher in size, then you want to adjust accordingly. So for me, if I do a collection of 12-inch by 12-inch paintings, that price per square inch is going to go up rather than like the regular. So here's an example. It's like if my price per square inch is $3.50 per square inch for my standard size, 30 by 40, whatever. If I go down to a 12 by 12, y'all know this, it's not easier to paint. It's like sometimes it takes you just as much time. It's not any easier. You're going to make less money on the painting anyway. So you raise your price per square inch for those smaller ones, right? So for me, my price per square inch might go up by $1 per square inch, or maybe even more. In the same token, I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Keep going.
And then in the same token, like I have this ginormous 9-foot by 6-foot painting, or 8-foot, I don't even know, 8-foot by 6-foot painting. Then I'm going to not do $3.50 per square inch. I'm going to lower that so that it's a much more approachable price point, and it's out of that average price range. So what that dollar amount to raise or what that dollar amount is to lower, there is no standard. So you just have to determine like your market value of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And also, sorry, Kate, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that what she was saying is, to reiterate what Jodie was saying, is there's a sweet spot, right? But I used to be like, as I got bigger, the price per square inch got lower. And then I'm like, why are these big paintings? They are taking me a lot longer. And so I stopped doing that. I started like tapering, finding the sweet spot. And then when beyond the sweet spot, they actually got more expensive because they were beyond my sweet spot, and they needed, the dollars per square inch needed to go back up.
Well, and also to that point, it like the sliding scale should almost be like a curve in a way, because once you get bigger, then the cost of your materials is so much higher. If it's really big, you might need, extra materials or a scaffolding, or there might just be more expenses that go into that. And I don't add expenses on top of the cost of the painting. I kind of just build it into that cost per square inch. So, if you do, so I agree with Jodie, you're starting out, you're at a higher price per square inch, you go down, but then there's kind of a tipping point where you're going to go back up, because the cost of your, to stretch 8-foot by 8-foot canvas could be thousands of dollars. And so that needs to be factored into the cost of the price per square inch, not to mention transport, which is a totally different topic of conversation. And for things like transport, framing, I charge extra, though that is not included in the cost of the price and the cost of the piece. And Kate and Jodie, is that the same for you? So like for shipping and framing, not the actual work itself, I'm charging that separate completely, typically.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, framing's a whole nother topic. I did see some people bring it up in the comments, but knowing, like everybody wants to frame their art, and it's different for plein air artists, I'm sure, but I don't even think we can go into, do we frame or not frame when we're showing our work? That's a whole nother discussion, and I don't know if you guys can agree or not with that, but that's tough.
Yeah,
I agree.
And something else that I'm seeing come up too, that, when we were putting this webinar together, there were so many topics that we could cover even just in a webinar in themselves. So one of them was different price points, or different, prints, and different price points for different types of collectors. But one thing we could touch on real quickly is just commissions as well. And, if you're working in commissions, there is, we kind of all talked, there is a price that you would mark up. Is that common that you see happen?
And for all of my clients, I mark up for commissions every single time, and I mark up 20 to 30%. I get a 50% deposit up front. No work is done until there's deposit. And I've never had somebody ask me why a commission is higher than anything else. And so, if there's anybody out there who does not currently charge more for commissions, please start today. And I promise you, it will be fine. Nobody will complain about it. It's a custom piece. Would you ever expect to get anything custom in any other situation without paying an upcharge? And with a commission, artists are artists because they want to create what they feel inspired to create. With a commission, you're sort of telling the artist what to do. And so there needs to be some benefit for them to want to do that for you. Not to mention it's maybe a specific size, maybe it's, you need a certain color palette, or, it depends on how many parameters the artist is going to allow you to provide. But commissions should absolutely always be 20 to 30%. I've seen them as high as 50 or 100% over retail. Personally, I always do 20 to 30. So you'll just sort of have to find what works for your market.
And I do want to point out, someone mentioned, yes, when I'm talking about prints, I'm talking about reproductions of original work, not printmaking prints or, original work. I'm talking about reproductions when you're, maybe making reproductions of original pieces that you're wanting to sell at a lower price point. That's a whole different conversation. So, we just unfortunately didn't have time to go too in depth there, but yes, I'm not talking about printmaking. So thank you, whoever pointed that out. Oh yeah, Kate?
I just want to say a lot of people were talking about that they use linear inch pricing, and I feel like it's super similar to square inch pricing. So I don't
I've had artists use linear inch. It's whatever you're most comfortable with.
Yeah. The only thing that I think all of us agreed on is not just basing it on, and this is for 2D art, but just on how much materials that you're using. That's not really the way that we go.
Yeah. And it all goes back to, it has to work for your medium, and it has to be specific to the work that you're doing. And that's why comparables are so helpful in going and researching other artists that are making similar work. So, we might be more familiar with 2D, but also, sculptors and people doing performance art and people who are, doing installations, all of that work has unique value, and there are different formulas that might work more specific to the work that you're doing. So we can't get too specific in answering very specific questions, but I do want to point that out that, it is different for every single artist. That's why pricing is so difficult, but it doesn't have to be impossible if you know where to begin. And hopefully this is helpful for understanding where to begin.
And just choose a formula that works for you. It can be square inch, it can be linear inch, just choose one and stick with it. There's one is not better than the other. Just be consistent.
Shelley, oh, Jodie, yeah.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I couldn't agree more with Shelley. And there is a tendency, I've heard artists that are like, well, this one took me this amount of time, and so I'm going to base it on my time plus my materials. And it's like, well, how do you know how much paint you squeezed out of a tube? And how do you know, like, do you include the time washing brushes? That's why that formula, it's so subjective and it's so all over the place. That's why you don't want to do that. You really do want to keep it consistent to like Shelley was saying, a linear inch or a square inch or some sort of formula like that.
And you can pivot, you can change if something's not working for you. You can adjust.
One more thing I want to add here. When I do the price per square inch, which is what I do for all my clients, I do price canvas differently than paper. So that's something else. So the price per square inch doesn't have to be exactly the same across the board. So that's just, taking into consideration your substrate, and perhaps when you paint on canvas, you use more paint, you use more layers. When you paint on paper, it's a little more loose and minimal. So, consider the materials you're using as well, and the price per square inch may differ because of that.
I also wanted to ask Shelley, you being an appraiser and an artist manager, are there specific tools that you use in appraising that you've applied to these pricing models, or how have those worlds kind of collided for you?
Yeah, I use my background in appraising daily, especially when I'm pricing my artwork for my clients. In appraising, we use a certain set of value characteristics to determine the value of a piece of art. And there's sort of different weights based on all those different value characteristics. The most important, of course, being who is the artist. That is going to have the most weight. And then After that, it's things like materials and size and year and rarity and provenance and of course market levels. I mean, as an appraiser, I have to know what's happening in the market for these different types of art, what's happening in contemporary art versus, you know, the regional Atlanta market. And so all of that market knowledge is used to help price my contemporary clients' artwork as well. So, you know, having an understanding of the market and market levels and market fluctuations and all of that, in addition to those value characteristics, go into how I price artwork for my clients every day. Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate that. I think that also moves to, oh, it moves to a slide or collection. I also have these kind of trickled in for those who are joining that are using Artwork Archive. There's this feature on a piece record where you can log your expenses, and it actually calculates that if you mark a sale with your total production cost and your revenue, so revenue minus those costs, and kind of gives you a clear picture of, you know, this is the profit of that piece, if that's something that you struggle with keeping track of. So that's something that's really helpful, whatever you're using. If you use a spreadsheet, if you use, you know, different methods, just make sure you're adding those costs and then you're actually going back and seeing the result of that. So
Jodie, how do you go back to that slide? How do you
Yeah.
get to that part in Artwork Archive?
So this is on when you're on a piece record
Mm-hmm.
and you click on, so you're just on your pieces page and you click on an artwork, and it pulls up that piece record where you can kind of see everything on that page. You're not going to click edit. You're going to stay on the piece record and you're going to scroll down to the bottom right corner, and it'll say, you know, expenses.
Okay.
And it'll say new expense, yeah, or income here. But this is after it's already marked as sold, and it'll show the production costs, but it'll keep track of those individual expenses. And then they'll also populate on your expenses page. But that's something that a lot of people miss. So that's something I like to point out.
That's cool.
And then, you know, yeah, the collector mindset. So we already kind of talked about all of these points, but Shelley, you actually mentioned that sales that you're seeing are requiring more touch points even. So, you know, we can sell a lot in a certain season, and then all of a sudden it just feels like everyone's gone dark and you're like, oh my gosh, and you have this kind of existential crisis when there's a lot going on in the market, and it depends on what's going on in the world. And so can you talk a little bit more about these touch points and what you've done and kind of how you've talked with the artists you work with to navigate for them to not freak out maybe, or?
Yeah. And I will start by saying, you know, the market in, let's say 2020, 21, 22, in the pandemic, we were seeing these outrageous sales cycles, and people were snapping up work sight unseen on Instagram, you know, with very little consideration. And so a lot of artist businesses in those few years were sort of going bananas. You know, collectors had a lot of extra cash. We weren't spending it on things like travel or fancy clothes because we were all at home. And so a lot of people were putting their money into art at that point. So, you know, come 2023 into 24, I'm sure a lot of people on this call have noticed that sales have been sluggish. They have dipped. And it's not the frenzy that we were seeing in the pandemic. And, you know, there's a lot of factors there. You know, there's, you know, interest rates had been rising. There's talk of recession. The art market is always bad in election year. So there's a lot of those factors happening. But that being said, collectors are still buying. It's just taking a lot more effort from a sales perspective. So, you know, a sale that might have taken 1 or 2 touch points 2 years ago is now taking 5 or 6 or more touch points, just back and forth, sending pictures, getting shipping quotes, this and that, answering questions, sending more photographs, etc. And it doesn't mean the sale is not going to happen. It's just going to take a lot longer. I have clients that have come back, you know, to me in the last couple of weeks or couple of months that I talked to 2 years ago about a sale, and they'll come back and say, oh, you know, is this piece still available, or is she still taking commissions, or etc. So don't give up. You know, at a certain point, you sort of have to accept the fact that perhaps the sale is not going to go through, but don't be discouraged, because you never know what's going to happen in the future. And you know, it's a strange market right now. And if anybody feels like they've had a serious dip in sales in the last year or two. You're certainly not the only one. I promise it's not your work specifically. It's at all levels of the market. We're seeing it even at the highest levels of the market, you know, at Sotheby's and Christie's and blue chip galleries. Everybody is seeing a pinch right now. So it's not just, you know, our local markets here. It's been a tough couple of years across the board.
Yeah, I think that's always good to hear when sometimes, you know, we work in silos, it feels in our studios alone. And so it's always nice to hear when you're like, okay, maybe, you know, it wasn't crazy.
And I could talk to those other points on the slide there. Sorry, I didn't realize I didn't know if I should keep going there about the discounts and everything else.
Yeah, we kind of talked
I guess we talked about some of that. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we did sort of touch on this, but you know, if I go back to a client, I don't find offering a discount necessarily closes the sale. It becomes more about does the collector want to part with their money for a piece of art or not? Are they going to put that money into something else? So sometimes on a commission, maybe I'll offer to shorten the timeline. Maybe, you know, we all have commission minimums, a minimum size and price. Maybe I'll offer to do a smaller commission to get a sale or something like that. But I'm not finding offering huge discounts or even small discounts is really moving the needle in one way or another. And maybe people have a different experience. I only know what I know. I manage, you know, a handful of clients and I manage them all fairly similar. But I'm not finding that, I know we've talked about discounts a lot. I'm not finding that they're the greatest sales tool right now.
Yeah, I feel like what I'm hearing you say is stand by your prices, be confident.
Once again, and be consistent.
And be consistent. If that's the only takeaway from this webinar, everyone, then you know, we've done our job. So let's move on to price increases. You know, this is kind of a conglomerate of different, you know, things that we've been talking about, but does anyone have any insight or thoughts that are percolating with how often you've raised your price? So, you know, it's kind of common every year. Do you have a specific month that you found that you're like, you know, I raise my prices every year, this amount of time, or has it kind of changed each year for you?
Well, I know Kate's got some great information on this. I can't wait to, I think I'm more excited about that slide than any of them, but because it's so clear in how she does it. It's so interesting. But what I always say is for the artists that I work with, let's see some really consistent sales and like selling out of your work consistently, because there's a tendency to be like, oh my gosh, I haven't sold anything in 7 months, but then come that 8th month, I sold 3 pieces, better raise my prices. It's like, no, let's see consistently how you're like, can you not keep up with your art? You know, can you not keep up with the sales? Like there's so many other things that go into it rather than just having, you know, one good month or a year. To me, it's like chronologically, I don't necessarily raise my price after a year. I raise it based on like, am I able to keep up with the demand?
Yeah, and I think it's not a one size fits all formula for this specifically. You know, like I was saying, back in the pandemic, pieces were selling so quickly, and a lot of people went through these wild price increases that just were not sustainable. And so sort of small, consistent price increases, I think, are the way to go. However, you know, in 2023, I don't think I raised any of my clients' prices because sales were so sluggish and it felt like there was a dip. It just didn't feel like the right time. So I also don't think saying every March I'm raising my prices 10%. I don't think you could be quite so black and white. It really depends on the market and your collector base. And it's really kind of a case by case basis.
Yeah. And I think that what you all have mentioned of just keeping track of those sales and really understanding is the only way that you're going to have clarity. It's like knowledge is power. So make sure that you have a place that you are able to keep track of these. You're able to look back. So then you understand, oh, I made this many pieces. So we're going to actually show an example. Kate has a fantastic, well, actually, let's go ahead and Kate, and we'll come back to this slide. Kate, thank you
Yeah.
so much. She has graciously offered to be as transparent as possible so that we can kind of see someone do this in real time. So can you kind of walk us through this diagram and what was happening?
Sure, sure. So you can see from me starting out, I said I was doing professional art since 2016. So I guess before I was really using Artwork Archive and anything like that, I kept everything on a spreadsheet and would write down when I sold a painting and what the name of it was and whatnot. And I tried to get close to $1 a square inch, you know, just kind of going on what they say to do. You know, I'm like, okay, I think it's this. Not making any of them like super expensive. You know, just trying to do the formula. And then of course 2020, you know, things like everyone said, everything online happened. People started buying stuff online. And through social media, I also did a little project. So I was able to do like a whole bunch of paintings, offered some discount, not a discount. I just said I was going to do these little mini paintings. And so I sold 20 of them. I go, but you're going to get a painting sight unseen and it's this price. And that's how come that number was high in 2020. So still I was at $1 a square inch. And then I noticed, moving on to 2021, you know, I usually do this around January. I'm super goal oriented. So I'm like, okay, I'm selling. I'm scared. I need to raise my prices because I can't paint at this level. I can't paint at this volume to sustain the prices. So I thought, so I raised it a little bit. And also I considered that at that point, I'm going into art shows, group shows, getting into maybe a museum show or a store or someone that wants to carry my work that sells art. So now you got to consider you're not just selling to friends and family anymore. You're selling to, you're going to have to pay that 40 to 50% in there. So how are you going to calculate for that? And then I think I noticed as I was going, you can see I don't know if it's 20% that I'm raising it. I kind of like look at my 12 by 12s. Maybe they were 225, then they went to 325. Now they're at 395 and they need to go up for next year. But I think each year it's a little bit, like I said, daunting, but I feel very confident based on what I've sold. So I'm not taking one sale. Like I've sold plenty of large paintings, but I'm not saying, okay, I just sold a really big painting and now I can raise my prices. I just reevaluate and look at overall all of the sizes, what sizes are selling, what the dollars per square inch is. Super, I get into the nuts and bolts of it, and try to do it in that way. I mean, but I feel like, you know, everybody has a little bit of imposter syndrome through this, but it's hard, but you have to really have confidence that this is the value, and I don't need to discount it when someone walks up because I have the background and saying, okay, this is what everybody else, this is what people are buying it for. You know, it's just plain and simple, you know, and having that confidence and working your way through it. And I feel like my numbers are really high, but I really put myself out there in multiple channels to, and not high in price, but high in volume. But I put myself out there to multiple places, showing up at shows, going to do group shows, going to do pop-ups, doing whatever I got to take at this level. I know what level that I'm at and where I'm growing out of right now. I'm about ready to price myself out of some of the shows because my prices will be too high, but I will be in another place. But I didn't expect it coming out of the gate. And I wasn't so in love with my initial pieces that they were overpriced. Then I couldn't sell any, and then I got discouraged because there's plenty of discouragement and rejection in this business. And we all see that, but I don't know if that helps. It helps you guys.
It helps so much.
Okay.
This was the other slide that you had that I wanted to touch on too. That was your insights when you were looking back. Does this speak to the other diagram as well?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I use this, and I actually use this kind of through Artwork Archive, and I was able to say, okay, how many 8x8s did I sell and how many 12 by 12s? My goal as I go is, first of all, I want to paint big. I like painting smalls. I'm comfortable painting smalls and bigs. And we know that smalls sell, they're affordable, approachable entry point for people. But I want to sell bigger paintings. And so and raise my prices at the same time. And so I had to take a look and see, okay, what's happening. And by actually creating those new bigger pieces and putting them out in front of people and selling them, then I'm like, okay, great. Now I can take it to the next step. So it's all methodical, step by step of how I can, level up in our careers.
I loved this point that you made. So I retraced your steps. So for anyone that's using Artwork Archive out there, you were saying that you were using the notes section. So whenever you're raising your prices, one, you go in and you put what the price used to be, and then you keep track of what you raised it to on the day, just so you always have that for your own info. And then another one, and we're sharing these slides with everyone as well, so don't worry if you're missing some of this info. Another one was the filtering. So you go and you filter by the pieces, like you just told us. And I just loved that. I haven't done that. And so I thought that was such an incredible tip.
Yeah, you just filter by size.
Yeah, and by the year. So you can see all those pieces in a year. So that was so helpful. I wanted to go back to this, and before I want to leave time for questions. So we're going to wrap up in a little bit with the actual slides, but I want to talk about communicating price increases. So I think that's really intimidating to a lot of artists. You need to raise your prices, but you're really maybe scared to tell other people. Jodie, how do you work with artists if they're feeling, nervous about communicating it? Is there a mantra, or is there something that you tell them to start with? What's your go-to?
Well, I think the first thing that we do is we've got to work on our personal self-worth around the price increase and everything. So my mantra is always, I'm a mother forking artist. I said forking, just so you know, forking. I understand my audience. Anyway, like really being able to sit in that, and there's that confidence, like Kate was saying, like, these are my prices. This is what they sell for. The only way these prices are going is up. But we've got to feel that kind of in our bones, and we can still be scared, right? So we can still be scared and do it anyway. But when you have the numbers to back up, this is how many I've sold, this is how I keep selling, like, that's so good. So the number one thing I would, when I'm working with clients to raise their prices, is for them to understand the value of what they do. It always starts with us as artists and understanding that. And then, oh my gosh, then the first time you sell one at that price, and then it's like, you're off to the races, right?
So true. And also, like we were saying, but also for me, like in my email blasts, or maybe online or social media, I'm assessing in the end of the year. This year I already know I have to raise my prices for next year. And now my next step is to communicate that through an email blast, through social media. And anybody that has bought a piece isn't going to be upset that it's going up. And I'm just, they're just average people too, that like art and they want to collect it. And they're like, hey, everything else has gone up in value. And if you look back to 10 years ago, what the cost of a painting could have cost is, let's just say it was $400. With inflation, that should be $550 now. So, we're in the mindset of what we kind of thought initially how much our art was worth, but you got to take that out and not, what I'm trying to say is that it's not just that old number from a long time ago where we initially thought, if I ever sold a painting, it's going to be this much. But you have to do all of these steps to create what your price is, and then calculate what the value is today, 2024, 2025.
And because, like I was talking about before, the sales cycle is taking so long. When I quote commissions, I typically say prices are valid for 30 days. If that client comes back 2 years later, which, trust me, has happened, and the price has increased in 2 years, that price was only valid for 30 days. 2 years later, I'm not honoring a price from 2 years ago that I quoted you. So you also have to be confident in your price increases throughout the year, even when people know what your prices were a couple of years ago. And, it's original art. There should be some sense of urgency to it. And, honoring a price from 2 years ago is not necessary. I mean, you go through price increases for a reason. And again, you have to stand by your pricing and be confident and know you increased for a reason and not feel like, oh, well, I quoted this other price, maybe I should honor that. You don't have to do that. The price today is the price today, not the price that was 2 years ago.
And if you look at historically, artists, if you look at, okay, well, so and so, well, that's their work. That's some older work of theirs. Well, and most of the time, that's more valuable. Some of their older work, because people are like, "Or should we not discount our older work?" No, no. I mean, it doesn't. It's not. That's not how it how it works. But also, here's the other thing: is that I know people are scared. They're worried. Like some people say, I don't announce that I'm doing a price increase, and I just do it quietly, and that's like you do you. That's fine. But there are some value. There are some. Clearly, I'm not an English major. There is some value in announcing to your email list or to your social media or to your galleries or to your art consultants. There is some value in announcing that, because that creates this sense of urgency for people who maybe have been on the fence a little bit about your piece. And so announcing that the prices are going up can create a sense of urgency and some sales around it. So I get both sides. Like, I just want to do this quietly and just, okay, that's good too. But there can be some great benefits to announcing it.
I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I think we've got about 20 minutes left because we're doing an hour and a half. So I'm going to actually turn the mic to Katie and Anna. I know that you've been monitoring the questions. This has been, I could talk to you forever, all three of you, about this for so long. There are so many rabbit holes we could go down, and we've got some great questions coming in. And also, thank you all for being so vulnerable and honest and encouraging. And this has just been a fantastic conversation. So I hope everyone out there is enjoying it. Please keep your questions coming in. Katie, let us know if there's any specific ones that would be great to start with.
Yeah, we've gotten so many great questions. So thank you for submitting those. Some of the common questions that we're getting, a lot of specific questions about different mediums. We've gone over painting and more two-dimensional art, and I know that is, your expertise, but do you have any recommendations for people working in three-dimensional work? Lots of questions coming in from ceramics to steel sculpture to video work, questions about prints. But if you have any suggestions or what you've heard from your peers about three-dimensional work, that would be great.
I think we can keep the same basic principles. And again, what Jodie started with, and I also use this method in appraising, is just looking at your comparables. Go find comparable artists working in a comparable medium, sort of figure out what, it wouldn't be price per square inch if it's a 3D work, but something similar. And the basic method is the same. You're looking for comparable pieces by comparable artists in a similar phase of their career. I think all three of us are most accustomed to 2D work. All my clients are painters, but the basic principles would work the same in other mediums as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And then, oh, go ahead, Jodie, have more?
No, I was just going to say, just keep in mind, just like the size, like 30 by 40 or whatever, the size, when you're talking about 3D, the size is going to matter there as well. So, like find a general price, and then you can work based on size to follow up with like what Shelley was saying.
Exactly. And then kind of a follow-up to that, if you're looking at those comps, say people are asking, I have work that's in different galleries all across the US. How do you kind of factor that in if you're trying to look at similar artists in a rural town, but you have your work in all different types of galleries? How do you think about that?
If you're going to ask me, like I just did a podcast earlier today where there's a woman, an artist. She's so good, and she lives in this tiny little town in Alabama. And that's where she started, was in Alabama. And it was great because it was her acquaintances, her neighbors, or like all of that, right? And so she had a lot of support. But then as she has been using an email list and putting it out on social media, it's just selling and her prices are going up. And so she's worried about pricing out, these people in her rural small town. And so she had to ask herself, what is it I want as an artist? Like, where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? What do I want to accomplish? And so she is like, you know what, I want to go on a national or maybe a global level. And so she starts pricing galleries that are across the country, or maybe are in some bigger cities. And so then, I guess we've been saying before, you've got to have consistent pricing throughout. So in that case, it's kind of scary because you don't want to upset the people like who were your bread and butter when you first started, but those people are going to be excited for you because like you just made their art more valuable. The art that they bought back, when you were first starting out, you just raised the value of that art. And so think about where you're going and where you're headed, and you're going to have to price your art based on that, because you have to keep it consistent.
And at a certain point, you may start with a smaller regional gallery, and hopefully if this is, your goals, you continue to grow and get into larger galleries and bigger art markets. And eventually, you do outgrow those smaller galleries, or maybe you outgrow your first collectors, and that's okay. I mean, that's all part of building a business and being an entrepreneur and increasing value and creating value for your early collectors. And that's part of it. You will eventually grow out of certain galleries, and that's okay. But if you're in a rural, let's say, gallery in Alabama, and all of a sudden you get picked up by a big gallery in New York City, then yes, the prices do have to match. And a rural gallery in Alabama probably won't be able to sell at the same price level as somebody in New York City.
That's really insightful. Thanks for sharing that. And then we're getting lots of questions about frames. And Kate, I know you had some thoughts about this. I know you work a lot. You've been thinking about how to include frame pricing with galleries. Can you talk about a little bit your thoughts around frames? Do you have any advice for that?
I don't know, because I'm struggling with it as just as much as everybody else. Because here's the deal: is I know what my price is for my art, and if I add the frame, I mean, I'm sure everyone's dealing with this. I add a frame, and I have to pay full price for that frame. Let's say that frame is $600. Well, the gallery just took 300 of that, so now I've just lost $300 in that frame. So do I up the price? This is something maybe more for Shelley, because it's such a, they look beautiful framed. And again, this could be different for plein air artists because they traditionally always frame their work. So maybe Shelley would be better for that.
The framing stuff, a lot of my clients, I would say most of my clients, work on canvas. Many of them don't frame their art. They choose not to. And they might finish the sides, paint the sides nice so that you don't have to frame the art. And ideally we don't necessarily get in the middle of framing, because that is a very personal decision. Some people frame all their art, some collectors don't. I wouldn't want to put a frame on something that somebody doesn't like, and then you're sort of just wasting money at that point. So as much as I can leave the framing decisions up to the discretion of the client, I will. That is different, of course, if it's a work on paper and perhaps it needs to be at a gallery, and so it needs to be presented in a way that can hang beautifully. So then, yes, you do need to consider the cost of the frame, and that needs to be taken into consideration when you price the work in conjunction with the gallery. And I mean, frankly, I've had clients who stopped making works on paper for galleries because the frame cost just didn't make sense in the end when they split the retail 50-50. So there are a lot of business decisions that go into things like this. And there's a lot of looking at your costs and your profits and making decisions that make the most sense from a business perspective. And I mean, yeah, like I said, I've had clients who will only sell, canvas pieces through galleries because they weren't making up the frame cost on works on paper. So it is case by case, and it's a hard thing to decide. But again, it is a business decision.
Yeah, a lot of my stuff I paint on panels. The majority of my stuff I'm paint on wood panels. And so they're very durable, and I have a certain signature way that I make them. And so I always just leave it up to the buyer. Like, you don't need to frame it, but it's your option to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I know, like, for a photographer, and watercolor, anyone, maybe a collage, something. I mean, it's a whole nother thing that I honestly don't have the expertise in.
Mm-hmm.
Good conversation, and know, we're all in it together, thinking about the same things, going through the same struggles. So, and so many people are active in the chat sharing their experience too. So I thank you for giving your advice and what you've gone through there as well. So it's great to see the community come together and share all your experiences. Another question that we're getting a lot is about shipping. How do you think about shipping costs? Do you put the shipping, a standard shipping on your website? Is shipping different when it's through your gallery? Do you want to communicate the shipping and not list it before? How have you guys handled that?
If it's through a gallery, sorry, go ahead. So go
No,
ahead,
you
Jodie.
go ahead, Shelley. Go ahead.
I was just
You
going
go
to say,
first.
if it's through a gallery, that's the gallery handles it. They're taking 50%, let them deal with the shipping aspect of things. If I'm selling it on a client's website, I might say something, just charge kind of like let's say $150 shipping deposit. And then I'll have some verbiage saying this is shipping deposit based on where you're located. We will obtain accurate shipping quotes and reach out, after the sale or something like that. So, framing or shipping is never included in the price. It is always in addition to, and that is usually quoted in some of these, 5, 6, 7 touch points I have with collectors. It's usually discussed within that, and I'll go get a accurate shipping quote from either UPS or a courier or a white glove shipper, whoever I'm using for that particular piece.
So I love this because my answer is different than Shelley's, and this is so perfect because it just shows you everybody. They're like, we all get to do it our own way, however it works best for you. So because I sell so much direct to collector, I want it to be as easy as possible, and so I always include the price of shipping with the cost of my paintings, and I say on my website, price includes shipping in the continental US. And so what happens for me is I'll add basically like Shelley's point, like $150, $200 for the cost of shipping, which is kind of ends up being an average. So because I live in a metropolitan area, I live in Austin, Texas, and I'll have shows here in Austin, and oftentimes people will take the piece with them, or I'll work with a designer and she'll take the piece with her. The cost of shipping is part of that, but then I'll have a painting that ships across the country somewhere else and it ends up being $400. And so, but I'm not losing any money because it's kind of offsets the ones that were, hand delivered to a client's home versus others that were shipped across the country. So it comes out kind of as an average of so I add the cost of shipping into the price of the painting just so that the collector knows, oh, I'm all in at this price, plus tax, by the way, plus tax. So, but so it just depends on like kind of how you're selling it, I guess.
And I'll add, I do it a little bit different. So
I love this.
I ship the smaller pieces. I'll ship for free because I just don't, it doesn't cost me that much to ship them. But on a larger piece, especially if it's on canvas, I first of all, on my website, I said, if it's a larger pieces, please contact for shipping rates. I'll figure out how much it's gonna, because it's not just shipping, it's packing, and that's a whole nother issue on big paintings. But what I'll tell them, especially if it's on canvas, I literally will say, if you want it, I'll send it rolled. I'll call a framer in your area, and this is how much it's going to cost you to get it stretched. And this is how much it's going to cost to ship. So that way they're saving that. I just try to say, I can ship it as is, it's going to be $500 to ship, or I can ship it rolled and I'll help you find a framer and you can get it stretched and you'll be happy and it'll be easier and the painting won't get damaged.
I've started doing I've started shipping a lot of pieces rolled as well to cut down on shipping costs. Because shipping, especially I have some artists who paint really big, like, 8 feet long type thing. And so to ship that across the country could be over $1,000. And so it's a lot easier it's easier, one, to unstretch it, roll it, ship it, get it restretched, at its destination. It's also a lot less likely to get damaged, as you said, when it's rolled instead of, in a crate or a box or something. I mean, I've had forklifts go through stretched paintings before. I've had everything happen, all sorts of things to, I started my career in fine art insurance, so I've literally seen everything. And so if you could reduce the risk of exposure, certainly do so. And shipping rolled is typically a little bit safer.
Great. I love all these methods. Thank you for sharing. And we are coming up on our last 5 minutes, but I'm going to try and go through 3 more questions, one for each of you. And we can try and go rapid fire through those. I don't want to take up too much time. This one is for Shelley. From a buyer's point of view, what is the appropriate amount of times to contact a buyer or buyer from the artist after sales? I know you had mentioned something about how you're seeing more frequency is needed. Can you kind of talk about the relationship and what you kind of advised your artists?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you're not going to force somebody to buy a painting they don't want to buy. If somebody reaches out and they ghost you, there very well could be a reason. Maybe they had sticker shock, maybe something else came up in their lives they needed to spend money on. But there's also a very real possibility they simply got busy and forgot to respond. So never allow your one email that goes unresponded to be your only email. I mean, I would say at least two or three more times check in just to make sure they got the email. If they respond and say, hey, thanks for the pricing, I'm not interested, then, let it go. But there's many, many times where people just get busy and they forget to respond. And then, they get your follow-up email and they're like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. Can I have a shipping quote, or let's proceed, or can you send me more photos? So don't get discouraged after one email, after one touch point. Give it a couple more, frankly, just to make sure they got their email and just to be top of mind and get back at the top of their inbox. Sometimes that's all they need.
Exactly. And then Kate, you work in editions. There's a lot of editions. Print questions are coming in. How do you think about pricing prints differently? Does the size of the print run matter? If you're only printing 10, are they more expensive? If you're printing 100, are they less? Do they go up if more are selling? Sorry to give you a tricky one.
Could you answer that in 2 minutes? Yeah, just
I'm going to be honest. Okay, I'm just going to be really brief because I think it's we all wanted to talk about it. There's not enough time to talk about it, unfortunately. So we're hoping for another webinar. I do open edition prints and I do limited edition prints. They're on different types of paper. And they're like different archival things and selling points for them. I don't know the rest of your question because honestly, it's just we all want to talk about it because it's such a big deal. And I like selling prints because it's a way for someone to start wanting your work and wanting to get a piece later on. At the same time, I don't want to be just in it for prints because I want people to buy my original work.
Yeah, I do think it's a big enough topic. A lot of people have requested it. So we'll bring that back to the team and hopefully have another hour we could talk just on that. So
Sure.
And then let's leave on this one, Jodie. This one's for you. You have some great advice about this. How do you confront imposter syndrome with pricing?
So first of all, I think it's really important to know that imposter syndrome really just comes from a lack of confidence. And I always say that confidence comes from competence. So confidence comes from competence. And usually when we can become more competent in either making better art, like, do you need to take a workshop from somebody? Do you just like you guys did today, right? Just doing this free webinar, you're going to have more confidence as you go pricing. So when it comes to pricing and imposter syndrome, get really clear that the work that you're doing is worth the pricing that you're putting it there for, right? So that in and of itself really, really helps with imposter syndrome. The other thing that I have found really helps with the clients that I work with imposter syndrome is to personify it. like really understand this is, oh wait, this is just kind of fear talking, right? And fear is never going to go away. It's always going to be there. We're always going to be afraid of being embarrassed, doing the wrong thing. Who do you think you are? Like all of that kind of stuff, right? And so I like to personify that fear and give it a name. So it's just like in The Little Mermaid when Ursula was trying to steal the Little Mermaid's voice. And like, so I'm just like, I'm going to personify it. And it's like, if it's me against them, if it's me against Ursula, I'm going to win every freaking time. So I feel like if I personify it and I know like, okay, no, this is just fear. This is just old Jodie. You know, this is just trauma. This is PTSD. This isn't actually real. So I'm going to keep pushing forward even when I'm scared. And when I have the competence of understanding that my pricing is right, then I can move forward just like completely confident, and the imposter syndrome get quieter and quieter and quieter. And sometimes it even leaves, but not for long, not for me, but it gets a lot quieter.
I love that. What a great way to end this session. I'm going to hand it off to Cassidy, who's going to show you how to get in touch with our panelists, with us after this for any additional questions. And we will be sending out those slides and resources. So thank you again for all your great questions.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Jodie, Kate, and Shelley for such an amazing webinar. There's so much information. I feel like I'm going to rewatch it, and we'll share the recording, of course, with everyone, and these slides and the chat, because I know a lot of information got shared in the chat. So we'll also send out, you know, how to get in touch with each of the panelists, their websites, social media. If you have any questions for us at Artwork Archive, you can email us at team@artworkarchive.com. We have so many free resources available. You don't have to have an account to access our past webinars, our blog, guides, and also check out other artists on the Discovery platform. If you want to try it out for free, of course, we have a 2-week free trial with no payment required. So give it a try, see if you can navigate looking back on your prices, logging all that information, and then we'd love to hear feedback on this webinar as well, and any future topics that you'd want us to discuss. We love hearing from all of you. So thank you so much. You could have been anywhere else in the world, and we're so grateful that you joined us here. And Jodie, Kate, and Shelley, cannot thank you enough for sharing your wisdom with everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I learned a lot from you guys. Thank you.
Likewise.
Ditto.
Yes, see you all again shortly. Everyone, have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.